Hey everybody, back here for chapter two, section two, Uniting for Independence. So talked about kind of the reasons behind everything that is currently going on in 1775 right now, and why we're thinking that. Okay, so we talked about a couple different things in the previous chapter, but as we get into chapter two, section two here, let's start talking about the colonies and how they've been on their own for a long time. Okay, so why listen to a monarch when it took over 2 months to reach the colonies? All right, we were supposed to owe our allegiance to them. We were supposed to serve as sources of raw materials, especially lumber and tobacco and different things along those lines. And in return, we got things like tea and paper and different things. Until the mid 1700s, the colonies were satisfied with being under British rule, which allowed them to have governors of the colonies and legislators. So we were ruling over ourselves long before, and I said this in the previous chapter, for about 100 years, over 100 years before we broke away, and they were letting us do that, and they had no problems with us until, we started to go off on our own and do these different things, and they didn't really like that too much, okay? And they started taxing us because they felt, and we'll talk about that in here coming up. So they started to tighten their control, and two events changed this relationship. Number one, the French and Indian War, and number two, King George III of 1770, around 1776. British defeat the French, eliminating their power in North America. We, as colonists in the United States of America, fight, all right, with Great Britain. The Indians are going to fight on both sides of the war. They're going to fight for the French, they're going to fight for the British. Okay, but we, specifically the colonists, fight with Great Britain. Now, since Great Britain wins, all right, they were left with this huge debt. And they felt like we owe them something because now we don't really have, they're going to offer us this protection from the French, and the French are going to take over the colonies anymore. Therefore, we need to be taxed. So King George III says, hey, you guys need to help pay for the war. He starts levying things on everything that we love at this point in time: tea, stamps, glass, sugar, paper, and other products. All right. The first tax imposed was called the Stamp Act, 1765. All right. This is a while before the Revolutionary War starts. So this was a long acting thing. It's 12 to 15 years before the war starts. 11 years. Require colonists to pay a tax on legal documents, pamphlets, newspapers, and even dice and playing cards. These are things that we love to do. There's no TV back then. Okay. So we like doing these things. They continue to increase over time. We start to protest. Protest builds this country. So if we look at our current times in protesting, you are allowed to nonviolent protest. That's one of the things that built this country. To say that we're not is way out of line when it comes to uh, kind of the political and the ethics that built this country. Okay, so the protest began to repeal the Stamp Act. We refused to pay British goods, so we boycotted them. We repealed the Stamp Act, and since we repealed it, the British start to pass other laws as well. Reaches a boiling point in 1773. Of course, the Boston Tea Party. Our colonists dress up like Native Americans. They go out. They pour $1 million um, into the bay during this time. From that point on, it really makes the British Crown mad. The coercive acts that are passed in response to this. They close the Boston Harbor. We could not govern ourselves anymore. They start sending over their soldiers, governing over us, becomes a police state. We start to unify. Why do we unify? And one of the things that brings us together is our hatred for the British. Okay? That's one of the things that brings us together. Yes, two things are we want to have freedom from the British and how much we hate the British. Okay, are two things that really bring us together. In 1754, this is kind of out of place, but Ben Franklin proposes way before any of this stuff starts to happen. He's the first one to kind of propose things. A plan, the Albany Plan, to select representatives from all of the colonies. In the 1760s, we begin to think of ourselves as Americans, united by their hostility towards British authority. So Franklin offers this, and in the 1760s, we start to not like them very much because of the taxes that are being imposed on us, and them saying, "Hey, we owe you everything." No, we've been your subjects. We don't owe you anything. We have been your subjects for a long time now. We have been paying you guys. We are here to benefit you. We've been giving you guys resources for over 100 years, but now you guys want us to do extra. You want us to pay extra. Now you're gonna. We've been representing ourselves for over 100 years, and now you guys want to come over here and bust everything up, everything good that we've known in our lives. We've been doing fine. Okay, if this never would have happened, we'd still be British subjects. So taking action, the First Continental Congress. And the First Continental Congress are known as the Sons of Liberty. Okay, Patrick Henry, Sam Adams. Okay, yes, the beer Sam Adams is from his family. Richard Henry Lee, who you guys have all heard of, and George Washington all attend this, just to name a few. And this is kind of the first action that they get together. Representatives from each of the 13 colonies, many of them large landowners and white. Some of them, yes, do have slaves. Get together, okay, and they are going to discuss what the next steps are, the first steps, and what the actions are. Many of them are not going to want to break away from Great Britain because Great Britain has the most powerful army in the world. We aren't even a country at this time, and we don't even have a military, okay? So it's almost ludicrous to think that we could even compete with the biggest military force in the world. All right, it's almost like a joke. All right, so we created an embargo on Great Britain, which was an agreement prohibiting trade and agreed not to use British goods. Of course, after we do that, British looks at us as rebels, and they say, no. Okay, King George III announces the colonies being a state of rebellion and sends redcoats to secure the 13 colonies. Along with this, you have to give the redcoats shelter. They're staying in the colonist's house. You have to make them dinner. You have to abide by the rules and laws. If you're a rebel, you will be hot tar will be poured on you. You will be feathered, okay, and in worst cases hung. All right. Each one of the guys that signs the Declaration of Independence, literally, there's a bounty put on their neck to hang them, and some of them even go into hiding, including Thomas Jefferson, which many of the colonists didn't like at that time. Lexington and Concord on April 19, 1775 is the first battle of the Revolutionary War. All right. You guys probably talked about this in U.S. History 1. We did a really good job. Even though we lost, we held strong in that battle. So after the First Continental Congress, we have the Second Continental Congress. So we've had a battle. It was not considered a war. We've had the Boston Tea Party, the Boston Massacre. Within 3 weeks, delegates from all over the 13 colonies gathered in Philadelphia. The Continental Congress immediately assumed powers of the central government, and it chose a guy by the name of John Hancock of Massachusetts as president. That's always a good trivia question. I always like this one. Who was the first president, in the colonies? Who was the first president ever to rule over what would be the United States of America? It's John Hancock. Next step that we have to figure out. Organize an army and navy, issue money, and appoint Washington as the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. I always do this with my kids. Why do we appoint General George Washington? Well, because Washington, he fought in the French and Indian War for Britain, and he was a very failed general during this time. Okay, very failed, lost almost every battle. At one point in one of his battles, he's almost killed. Okay, and one of the reasons why we choose him is, number one, he has a great presence, and number two, he is taller. He has the presence that he brings. He's tall. Okay, he has fought in wars, and we don't really have anybody else, okay? So General George Washington is given this. Ben Franklin was a big proponent for selecting George Washington, okay? And immediately he assumes it. He takes responsibility of it, and very interesting. We'll talk a little bit more about Washington to come here. Read a couple books on him and the Revolutionary War, which is interesting. Second Continental Congress, okay, serves as the acting government of the colonies. So just like you guys did in last week when you guys were creating your islands, all of a sudden now our Second Continental Congress is literally the Congress that has to develop everything to create. Basically, we have split, and we have to figure out how to split, and we have to figure out how to be the acting government. We have to create our own country. So we start purchasing supplies, negotiating treaties, and rallying support for the colonist cause. Independence. Common sense. Make sure you know that. It's going to be on your test. It's written by Thomas Paine. He starts to argue. These people start writing stuff. Our founding fathers start writing stuff. It's being put out to the colonies. Okay. Arguing that a monarchy was a corrupt form of government and that George III was an enemy to liberty. Sam Adams was a son of liberty, was upset over the fact that there was no Declaration of Independence. Okay, so we have to draft one. And the guy that's going to get chosen to that, as everybody knows, got the name of Thomas Jefferson. Yes, gets a lot of ideas that we talked about from John Locke. In June of 1776, after a year of fighting had begun in the colonies, Richard Henry Lee, okay, of Virginia does declare independence. The colonies should be free and independent states. We promptly name a committee of Adams, Franklin, and Jefferson, Robert Livingston, and Roger Sherman to prepare a written declaration. Adams, Franklin, and Jefferson are going to be three big proponents in creating this document together, although Jefferson does get coined with writing it because he was the greatest pensman during this time. But Franklin and Adams really do help during that time in him writing it. They pull a lot of things from documents that you guys have read. You guys will be able to see that if you did your founding documents treasure hunt yesterday. So they asked Jefferson to write this draft, and he's known for his writing skills, like I had stated before. On July 2nd, 1776, they approve Lee's resolution for independence, and after a considerable debate, a few passages were removed, and on July 4th, 1776, the Congress approves the final draft. Hancock's the president. Our signatures of 56 delegates. And you ever hear the term, hey, can I get your John Hancock? You might have heard that. Because John Hancock, he's the first one to sign the Declaration. He signs it the biggest. And if you see his name, I'm going backwards, okay, you'll see the big signature of John Hancock as a statement that, hey, I'm putting my name on here. Come hang me. I'm standing up for independence. Okay, so these guys had to really stand up for what they believed in during this time with basically no military, basically a group of ragtag soldiers. And it's crazy to think that we won this war. So to explain the reasons for declaring independence, its actual title was the Unanimous Declaration of the 13 Colonies. All right. You don't have books, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to post a document, the Declaration of Independence, Q&A that you guys are going to do, and I'm going to post the Declaration on there. And I want you to read the Declaration, and what you're going to see is we're going to declare ourselves separate from Great Britain, and then right after that, it's going to say the reasons why, boom, 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 because they taxed us, because they took away this, they took away that, they were repressing us. Think about your repressive government's activity. I've talked a little bit about this with the kids in class, but think about how repressive Great Britain was to us, and that's the exact thing that we fight against today. That's what our military fights for us to be able to make choices. That's what our country was founded upon. Think about the history of our country. Our military, the people who originally fought for revolution, were rebels. They were rebels. They wanted to be able to make a choice for themselves. Okay, a lot of people think, no, you shouldn't be able to make a choice because I disagree with it, and it should be illegal. Well, if you start taking our freedoms away, then how are we any better than North Korea? How are we any better than Russia? How are we any better than China that regulates their social media and regulates their people and what they can or can't do? We should be able to make choices in this country, period, because that's what it came from. That's the history of this country, all right? And you know what's going on in the world today, okay? So think about that. All right. Now, you shouldn't be able to break rules and laws. If there's laws created by Congress, then you shouldn't be able to break them. But we're talking about our individual freedoms here, then we should be able to make a choice to have a say in things, to be able to feel and do as we please, be able to stand up for what we believe in and not be ridiculed or convicted upon those actions. I mean, that is going back to the founding of this country. Okay, and that's what our military fights for, to be able to do and make those choices. If it came down to Mr. Stauffer going to war to fight for those choices, I would leave in 2 seconds. All right? After the Declaration is drafted, we have to start thinking about how we're going to figure out how we're going to do this, create this government. By the end of 1776, 10 states adopt written constitutions, and most of them contain a Bill of Rights, individual freedoms, defining these. And we're going to talk about those freedoms and how important those freedoms are. Our First Amendment speech, all right? Freedom of speech, petition, religion, press, assembly, our 5 freedoms. That's huge right there, okay? Being able to do and act upon those things and how we feel about those things is the foundation of the United States of America, and this is where it all comes from in the government and the creation of our government. All right, so what you're going to do now is you're going to do your Declaration of Independence Q&A. You're going to read the Declaration of Independence. From the Declaration of Independence, you're going to do that. And then you're going to watch a video from YouTube called Rebels, America, the Story of Us, guys. Have a great week.